Good morning, Stampers. This is Debra Burgin with Heartfelt Inkspiration, and I want to talk to you today about working with ribbon and twine. I have several points I want to make, and although I certainly could edit this video and do something fancy, I'm simply going to give you the topic right here. So, the first thing I want to talk about is tools for working with ribbon. For me, the most important thing is a pair of scissors that are specifically for fabric. These are the fabric scissors that are ribbon scissors that Stampin' Up! Used to sell. If you have good shears for sewing, that is perfect. What you don't want to do is use these scissors for anything other than fabric or ribbon. So no paper with these. They're very sharp. They cut ribbon beautifully. So you'll want those. Secondly, and you're gonna not understand this for a little while. A punch. This again was something. This was a punch, handheld punch that Stampin' Up! Used to sell. This is an 1/8 inch hole punch. You can see it there. It's a pretty little hole. And just FYI about punches, I took the cover off of the end that catches all the punchies so that, no, sorry, it's this end. It catches all the punchies. And I just ripped that off so that I could see the hole and see what I was doing. So that's another little tip. That didn't even cross my mind for talking about this. And then one of my stampers, thank you, Pat, gave me this tip about working with fabric is to keep a crochet hook with your stamping supplies. And I will show you why a little bit later. Okay, so those are my important tools. And my next point is, how to tie, I had them in the wrong order, how to tie a freehand bow. Now, some of you have little bow makers that have pegs and you wrap the ribbon around and tuck it back through a loop and so forth, and those make beautiful bows. However, if you don't have one of those, you'll want to know how to do it without a tool. So I'm going to start with some retired ribbon. This was Night of Navy gingham ribbon, and actually I'm going to start this way with the tail on in my right hand or towards my right hand. And this is what I do. So this is kind of like tying your shoes, but not really, because A, you don't have shoes on, and B, you don't have to make that first tie. You just do it starting with a loop. So I'm going to start my loop. Basically, I'm going to hold my fingers, leaving myself enough to create the tail. So I'm making a loop. So the tail is on top, the loop. I'm going to take the end that's still attached to the spool, and I'm going to go over my fingers. You see that hole that's in the loop there? And being careful that I keep it flat going around, I'm going to poke this through that loop, that hole. Now, I don't really care if this looks like a beautiful bow yet, because I'm going to play with it a little bit, but I wanted to get it tied. Now I can adjust the loops, adjust the tail, until it's the size I want, and I'm not making this look very easy. And the knot is the way that I want, not the way I look. Okay, and so that's a pretty nice bow there. And then I'm going to use my ribbon scissors and cut the tail. Okay, and this is what the back of that ribbon looks like. Not as pretty, but this part is flat because I made sure it wasn't twisted when I wrapped it around, and so this is the perfect location for a glue dot. Okay, now just out of curiosity, how long of a piece of ribbon did that take? I do it right on the spool so that I don't have to cut it first, but let's just measure that. So I'm going to undo it and note that it is about 11 inches. It's not about, it is a little more than 11 inches. And that's a good number to know, because the next thing that I'm going to talk about is how much ribbon do I need. So I am starting a card here. Well, I've got it almost finished except for the inside, and I'm going to use this same retired ribbon to tie a bow, no, not a bow, tie a knot at the top. So how much ribbon you use? Well, if it's going around, you're going to need, of course, twice whatever this is. This card is a 5.5 inch wide card. So I know that if I want to go around and through the inside, I need at least 11 inches. And then my rule of thumb is that I need at least 5 more inches for the knot. Now, one of the things that my stampers told me is that I will tell them, I don't have that. I will tell them how much ribbon to cut. Usually there's a little sticker on the spool about how much ribbon they need when we used to have in-person camps. And then sometimes people would say, you always give us so much ribbon. But here's my feeling. I would rather have too much ribbon to work with than too little. And I don't have enough to hold or wrap or whatever. I'd rather cut off some than cut a piece of ribbon that's not long enough and then have to start over with a longer piece. So yeah, I'd rather waste a little bit. Okay, so again, 11 inches to go around the card and an extra 5 for the knot. Okay, so that's my rule of thumb always. And knowing that the bow that I just tied was 11 inches, believe it or not, I might want to cut 22 inches to create a bow with this ribbon going around the card this way. That seems like a lot of ribbon, and it could be, but again, better too long than too short. Okay, now just some other rules of thumb. The wider the ribbon is, the longer your piece needs to be. The more stiff your ribbon is, the more body it has to it, the longer your ribbon needs to be. So this is fairly wide. This is wider, and I need to tell you, I told you this in my post yesterday, I rarely put a bow on cards because it's too bulky. So I put a lot of ribbon with knots, but very rarely bows. And so this would create a fairly bulky knot if it was part of going around the card. Okay, and let's look at some other ribbon. This is, these I think are all retired. This was the variegated ribbon with petal pink. This ribbon was gorgeous to tie because it's incredibly soft and fluid is the word that I use. So tying a knot from this, same thing I just did, is just so easy to tie and not very bulky. So that might be an exception to my rule. On the other hand, this ribbon, which is our flax ribbon, had a lot of body to it. I would never ever make this into a bow, and I'm not sure that we ever actually used it for a knot. I used to put this across a card and so that it was flat. And then something that we don't carry anymore, but I still have a nice healthy stash of, is our twine. So black twine and white twine is important to me. This was one of the thicker twines. If I'm using this, I for sure do not need as much as I just said. We would need, of course, 11 inches because it still has to go around the card. But what you need for a bow is nothing like we're going to use for this ribbon. So there's black twine. This was a twine that came in a pack, and I don't know if you can even tell, but it's very stiff. So before I would work with this, I would just put it between my fingers between, with my thumbnail and run it through to take away some of that stiffness so that it was more fluid. Okay, and what else do I have? I think that's it. Okay, so those are my rules of thumb for how much ribbon. Now let's talk about one of my favorite things that I learned. I guess I learned it on the internet like so many other things. How to anchor a ribbon, or the anchoring technique. Now, I do this many times every week. This is second nature to me. But I know that many of you don't use this technique. Many of my regular stampers don't use this technique, and so every time that you do it, you have to think about it, and that's okay. There are some easy things to remember here. So, first of all is that I want to make a hole where the knot is going to be, and this is why we've got the hole punch. Now, this is I think this is 1/2 inch ribbon. And so 1/8 of an inch hole is not going to work very well. I'm going to go up to 1/4 of an inch, which you'll see might seem like it's too big of a hole. And you don't really want this to show. You know what I should do? I should show you what this looks like first. Okay. Here's a card that is going to use the anchor technique. I'll show you how I know that. That I did tie with a bow, just to go back for a second. And this is a very flat bow because it is the seam binding ribbon. I just dyed it with, I think I used a brayer on it, or maybe a sponge, I'm not sure. This is very flat. This card is just a knot from one of our current ribbons. And so let me show you what an anchoring technique is and why you want to use it. So if you don't know this technique, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it just doesn't work for me. You would wrap your ribbon around and you tie a knot. And then your ribbon is going to be slidable back and forth because there's nothing anchoring it. And for me, I feel like I need another hand to come over here. Somebody to put their pinky here so that when I am knotting it, nothing's slipping. Okay, and well, I don't have an extra pinky around to help me with this, so I use this technique. And let me show you what it looks like from the inside. This is the hole that you're not really going to see very much, but this is the hole that creates the anchor. That's what it looks like on this card. And on this card, well, of course it looks the same. Now, sometimes people don't like this. Well, sometimes people don't like to see the ribbon inside of the card. Okay, so I can't help you with that. It doesn't bother me. And I don't really mind this little detail showing because actually I think it's kind of pretty. Even on a thicker ribbon, that doesn't really bother me. Okay, so the advantage of the anchoring technique is this is not going anywhere or far, because you're able to get it really snug and tight on the card. And you don't need somebody else lending their finger to you. Okay, so sorry, I should have told you why I do this. So I'm going to punch 1/4 of an inch hole. Now, I can only go clearly as far as what I call the throat of this punch. So if you want a hole in the center so that everything is balanced and, lined up, you're not going to be able to use a conventional handheld hole punch, but you might have what we used to call an anywhere hole punch. This is a little one. And for this, you're going to make sure that you've got a self-healing mat or some kind of a punch mat underneath there. And you're going to make sure you open the card, put this where you want the hole, and then whack it with a hammer, making sure no one's asleep upstairs. Okay, for me, I just like the off-center, so I don't need any other tools. The other thing I want to tell you about punching with this has been always true, is if you feed this in as far as it goes and punch right at the throat, you're going to get little, what I call teeth marks from this little pinching area here. I'm going to sacrifice one of my note cards. You can actually see how that's going to occur. I think you can see that there. So I'm going to punch, and see those little teeth marks? You don't want that on your card. Sometimes the ribbon's not going to cover that. So I am going to put it in as far as it goes. I'm going to put it in between my mat and the rest of my card. And I'm going to bring it all the way in and then bring it slightly out. Okay, so no teeth marks. So that's where my knot is going to be, at the point of the hole. Let's tidy up here. Okay, so this is my 11 inches plus 5 extra inches. And here's the part that a lot of people get stuck on. We need to get these ends on top of the card so that you can tie a knot. So you need to remember that when you do this, the end is going to go through the inside of the card and come out the top. Because how else can you tie a knot if the end is not on the top? Then I'm going to take the inside and I'm going to wrap it all the way around the card, and this piece is going to go through the very same hole. Now, I take this and pull it away so I can see the hole. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I've got my ribbon going across, and I've got my 2 ends on top. Now I'm going to make sure nothing is twisted in here. And actually I have a lovely twist that I'm just going to fix, because it's not helpful to have a twist. Okay, so sorry about all this messing around. Good. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do, so these ends are not exactly the same, and it's going to be okay. I'm going to trim this anyway, but I'm going to take one of these ends. You can actually see that one wants to go up and one wants to go down. So I'm going to take the downward one, although I'm going to make this just a shade longer, the downward one, and put it underneath the ribbon, and the other one goes on top. Now's the time to make sure one more time that nothing's twisted, and snug this up so that it's relatively tight. This is where somebody would help me with that. So that is the start of anchoring a ribbon. Now, the next thing that I'm going to show you is, lost my note cards, how to create a beautiful knot. Okay, so I'm going to do this, I think, several times. Okay, if you were a Girl Scout, as I was, you know how to tie a, no, this doesn't have anything to do with square knot, just disregard that. Okay, never mind if you were a Girl Scout or not. Okay, I'm taking one tail, putting it over the other one, and I'm going to bring it through the hole here, the loop. Okay, and then I want to be very careful. So many people just want to yank the knot at this point. I want to be careful that as I'm tightening it, this piece right here, let me just get my crochet hook. This piece on here, you can clearly see that's the one that needs to go on top, whereas this piece needs to go inside. So as I'm pulling this, I want to make sure that this piece ends up on top. So I do not tighten this until my knot is worked out correctly. So see how that is? Hold this so that this comes out on top. So when you think of a knot, you think of 2 ties. One knot and then the other one on top. That's where I was going with the square knot. And this is not the way this is, because in essence, your hole is the first knot. That secures the ribbons together, and then your real knot is the second knot. Okay, and then I'm going to trim this. And here's another little tip. I can remember one time making Christmas cards that had some kind of a ribbon and maybe even a double something, and my husband was, can I just say, fit to be tied, haha, because he could not get the card in the envelope because the tails of the ribbon were not cooperating. Okay, so I don't do that anymore. But the other thing is, you want to make sure that when you trim this, this is going to be able to get into an envelope easily. So clearly we don't want this envelope way long because it's going to get bent and whatever. And the other thing that I do is to trim it so that, like if this was the end, so that the angle matches the edge of the card. So this is long on the bottom, shorter on the top, so it just so happens this end also is. So I'm going to approximate this. Okay. And there we have it. A cute ribbon treatment on here. I didn't really do my trimming evenly. That's the advantage right there of having sharp scissors, is you don't have to hold something to keep it from bending, or, you know, to give it some structure. Okay, so there's my birthday card for one of my friends in October. All right, so that's anchoring. So let's look at that one more time. Except I don't have a card to work on. Okay, suppose this is my tag, and here's my hole, and I want to anchor a ribbon. So again, I'm going to go, I don't want that one. Let's choose a different ribbon, shall we? Let's choose this one. I want to go 1, 2, and 5 inches. This is going to be way too long. Okay, so this is about 2 3/4 inch. So I'm going to put the ribbon through the back. Well, we'll do it this way. We'll pretend that's the front. Take the long piece all the way around and bring it up through the same hole. Okay, check to make sure nothing is twisted. Put one end under and one end, so one end going down, one end going up. Snug it up, make sure again that nothing is twisted. And I like to get this ribbon centered over the hole. And I'm going to put one end on top and through the loop, and the other end. So again, you can see two things. This is starting to twist and get pleated, or whatever the word is. And this side is the one that needs to go on top. So as I pull the ends, I'm going to make sure that that one ends up on top. Now, I always anchor that. Even if this was a, I always anchor my ribbon. Even if this is a tag, I anchor my ribbon, because it, again, for me, it is not having anybody else to say, can I give you a hand with that? You want me to hold? Okay, so there's another ribbon. And I will tell you that that's not a very pretty knot. The more fluid the ribbon, the less important that is. And where's my one card with? Because so this is a, I guess I would say, an ugly knot, but it doesn't make any difference because this is so flat, and this is actually pretty flat too. Okay, that's how to anchor, and that's a beautiful knot. So yesterday's card showed you a bow in a knot. So let's try that one. I'm going to create a, this is also retired twine, and I will tell you that I don't get rid of my twine because I really like using it. Okay, I'm going to make a bow from this twine, and I'm going to, again, start approximately leaving myself enough for a tail. There's my loop around and through. And then there's not a lot of messing around when you use twine because there's just no ribbon there's no bulk to play with. Now, twine has its own little characteristics, and that is because it's twisted, sometimes this has a life of its own. and the loop wants to twist and turn, and you know what? Life is too short to worry about that, so I don't. Okay. Now let's try a knot. And this time I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm going to make sure I have a lovely little knot here, nothing twisting, but I'm not going to pull it all the way tight because I want to be able to take this and put it inside the knot. I will be hiding the center of the ribbon. So this is where your crochet hook comes in useful. It comes in handy, whatever. So I'm going underneath the loop, grabbing my bow. Much easier if I'm not recording this. Pulling it through, right? No. Okay, pulling it through. Dear. Okay, oh, or simply feeding it through, including its tail on this side. And then it's not until I have this in the right place that I want to start tightening this knot. So there's a bow inside of a knot. It doesn't really show up very well. Okay, so there we have a bow in a knot. I like to use this on top of a tag because it's relatively flat. I'm messing with this. It's relatively flat. And by the way, if I had a tag that had a hole in it, like a lot of our dies do, I usually do not tie through that because your bow is sideways and whatever. Instead, when I'm securing the tag to the card, dimensionals, I put a dimensional under the hole, and that way I can do that. I'm sorry, this is just not very pretty. Okay, but I'll put a dimensional under the hole so that it holds this ribbon. So I'm not too happy with this, but maybe it needs to go on the other side. Okay, I'll go back to the drawing board on that one. And something that would have helped me is if I had secured the ends of my ribbon with sticky notes. So I could tape them right down here. Again, it's like having somebody else holding it, and that would have been useful. Okay, this is going to bother me until I get it right. But meanwhile, I'll let you go. And so I thank you, and I hope my tips are helpful. And next week, I have 5 quick tips for stamping in general that I'll share with you. So thank you, and I will see you next week.